Hello, everyone. Welcome to Something to Talk About Live. My name is Liz Owen. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Director of Communications at PFLAG National. Great to have you with us for our another episode of our show. I am particularly excited about today's show because we are hosting a phenomenal author that our host will tell you more about, who I have also known for literal decades, since we were in diapers, 20 years since we were 5. So with that, I am going to bring on my friend and colleague, our host, Jean Marie Navetta.
We usually wait for a few minutes until we detach from reality on this show, Liz. It seems like we started really early.
Do not kill my joy.
I'm sorry. I don't want to kill your joy, but I really wanted to talk to you about the fact that I don't understand how we never got a call from the Rachel Maddow show for the two of us to sit in for her while she's on hiatus.
I was a little hurt, but not entirely offended because there's still time for them to reach out. So
there is. Well, I mean, after this early detachment from reality, I don't know.
Well, have a wonderful show.
I'll see you later, Liz.
Okay, bye.
Hey everybody, my name is Jean Marie Navetta. My pronouns are she and ella, and I am the Director of Learning and Inclusion at PFLAG National, and I am clearly incapable of taking anything seriously any longer in my life. But one of the really serious things that I do get to do is this show every week where we get together to talk about something related to inclusion and LGBTQ issues. And we have been talking about books a lot and bans and what it means from all different angles. And this week we have another book ban. But we're going to take it from a slightly different angle this week and really focus on how many of these bans are very specifically targeting the creative works of Black authors. So for those of you who read the article and want to have the discussion at home, our article appeared in the Week by Michael Arceneaux, and it was entitled "Book Banning is Back and It's Targeting Black Folks." And so to have the conversation this week, Liz already sort of tipped our hand. We have an incredible writer with us. David F. Walker is an award-winning journalist, a filmmaker, a comic book creator and writer, and the creator of the pop culture zine, Badass Mofo. He has also worked on Naomi for DC Comics, the Eisner award-winning Bitterroot. His graphic novels include The Black Panther Party and Life of Frederick Douglass, both of which are really amazing. And I am super excited to welcome him to the show for this week's conversation. So I'm excited to bring in David F. Walker.
Hello.
Hey, David, how's it going?
It's going good. I'm not used to some of this stuff. So I guess, well, it says there on the screen, he, him, but both you and Liz provided your pronouns. So I'm a he, him person.
Thank you.
Now that we got that out of the way, let's just get into the meat of this.
Now let's really get into it. So I was just doing a quick list this morning. Recent, and some of these have been banned many times, but on the list of current book bans, The Color Purple, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sing, Class Act, The 1619 Project, The Bluest Eye, The Hate U Give, Stamped, The New Kid, Go Tell It on the Mountain. We can keep going and going and going and going. There's a real pattern here with these book bans. So yeah, it's ugly.
It is. I'm just disappointed that none of my books are on that list right now, because I feel like I'm not doing something right. Especially the one that I'll tell you though, the one like New Kid, which is by a really good dear friend of mine. Really, like there's every now and then something will pop up on the banned book list where you're like, well, okay, I can get why backwards people would not want this out there, but what is it about New Kid? And yeah, just that list that you just read off is it's kind of heartbreaking, really.
It is. And, I have to admit to you, as I looked at them, I thought some of these are books that I read in high school, which was not recently, we'll just say that. And that there is still a battle over some of these books. It absolutely, I mean, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
It's just, I think the thing that's disturbing, though, when we're talking about some of that stuff is how generational it is, right? How generational this intolerance is, or this belief that somehow, shielding young people from certain words or certain ideas is going to protect them, when really all it does is it just continues to breed a level of intolerance and ignorance that it just reinforces it, right? It's like, stupidity breeds stupidity.
It kind of does. And that's actually one of the things about this that frightens me, that as we pull so much of this content and much of this content gets removed from schools and removed from curriculums, we are creating an entire populace that has not been exposed to basic facts about the world around them. And then we're going to expect informed decisions to come out of that same population.
Well, see, you hit the nail on the head. No, we're not supposed to expect informed decisions. That's why this is being done. Like, how do you don't when you raise sheep, you don't raise them to be aggressive and to attack. You raise them to be docile and led to slaughter. And that's sort of this idea that that anybody knows what's right or wrong. Just reading about some more book bannings in Texas, and it was like a list of the books that have been banned, and then Mein Kampf hasn't been banned, right?
Right.
It's and I'm sure the Bible hasn't been banned, and that's got more violence and depravity than anything. That's worse than Caligula. So it's selective, and you're right. It's when with that article that was mentioned at the top of the show, there does seem to be a different standard held towards, I guess we'll call them different groups of people. We can call them people of color. We can call them LGBTQ people. But ultimately, what it is it's anyone who's marginalized or oppressed. Books that speak for them and to them are held to a different standard because, God forbid that their humanity is recognized or asserted, right? And it's but it's just fascinating to me. I think it's also difficult because I don't consider myself to be the most rational of people or the most intelligent of people, right? I mean, I will be the first to admit that I believe in Sasquatch, and every day I am checking, news feeds to see if there's any new Bigfoot sightings. But that said, I try to remain fairly open-minded to all different things, and to see this attitude that information can be harmful, right? It's I can't wrap my head around it, and I think that's sort of the problem for. I'm not going to include you in this, but I'll include myself. Is that I try to think like somebody who will look at a book like Mouse, which was just recently banned in Tennessee, and go, like, I'm trying to get into the mindset of somebody that looked at that book and thought it was problematic. And I realized I can't get there. And that's the problem, right? Like, I can't, you literally have to reach into my skull and pull out chunks of my brain and throw them across the room and then not reattach them in order for me to be like. Did you read the minutes from that school board meeting, by the way?
I did. And, as you were saying this, I have had the exact same experience where I try to think, I need to understand where you're coming from. And you try so hard to really understand the background, and you can't. And when I read the minutes, it got to the point where there were all these things said about nudity and violence and this, and then the word indoctrination is used. And I thought, that's it. This one person who said this one word, he got it. That's it. That's what they were claiming this was. And that's where I think my head exploded.
Yeah. And so it's with all of these things, it's terrifying, but at the same time, it's nothing new, right? No. I mean, we faced all these issues before, but the thing is that the reason so much of the stuff is rearing its ugly head with such ferocity right now, I believe, is because we have banned so many books in the past, and we have tried to limit the discourse, and we have bred multiple generations of truly, and like, if someone wants to disagree with me about this, that's fine. If they want to step outside and settle this with fists, that's fine too. Because that language, some people will understand more than the language of reason. But we've bred generations of truly ignorant people who lack any sort of critical thinking skills. And I say that all the time. I think that the two most important courses you could teach a kid after they learn, basic reading, writing, arithmetic is critical thinking and is communication skills. And we live in a nation where both of those things, communication skills and critical thinking, are being viewed as like some sort of lethal disease. Like having them is bad for us. So, yeah, it's enough to make me want to take a nap in the middle of the day and just, weep, cry myself to sleep.
I have to admit, I know the exact feeling. I was actually just communicating that to somebody. I was saying how it gets to be so much, you just start to feel yourself beginning to just blank and shut down. So I want to talk a little bit about how this affects particularly people who are marginalized and students who are marginalized, especially younger people. I was talking to my mom this weekend and I said to her, it wasn't until I was a senior in college that I actually had any books taught to me where the authors were identified as openly gay and that this was a significant piece of what drove their creativity. And I remember sitting in that class and thinking how amazing it felt to suddenly have access to this whole universe that I knew was there, but no one had taken the time to teach me about it. No one had actually said the word lesbian, for example. And I just felt like the entire world in some ways cracked open to me in the best kind of way. So for you, as somebody who is a creator, who is writing and creating this content, what was it like when you were growing up? Did you ever see things that reflected you? And were you conscious of that at the time?
I was fairly conscious of it, and going all the way back to my, I have specific memories of like movies that I watched that really just rubbed me the wrong way, and I didn't, whether we call it diversity or equity or inclusion, those are some of the buzzwords. We weren't using those, 40, 50 years ago. But I still had that feeling of watching, a TV show or going to see a movie and seeing no people of color in these movies, no one that I could relate to in even the most remote sort of ways. And that definitely fueled me, that especially as I got older and began to understand that feeling and was able to articulate that feeling. I mean, I remember, we'll go way back. There was, I remember The Wizard of Oz was playing in the movie theater. This was in the 70s, and it was, they would revive The Wizard of Oz every like 10 years and bring it in theaters. And my mom took me to see it. I couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 years old at the time. And I just remember sitting there and, the entire trip that we take through Oz, I remember like there was nobody who looked like me or my family. Right. Like, and I kept waiting. And when they got to the Emerald City near the end, the two parts that just like shocked me as a kid was where the lion was like at a beauty parlor and was getting his hair done, and there was no black women there. And I was like, what, how is that possible? Like, because in my mind, when you went to the beauty parlor, which I always went to with my grandmother, that was where black women, congregated. And then when the Tin Man was getting, rub here, rub there, and there was no black people there either. And I was like, well, he's at the car wash. I mean, that's how I, interpreted that as a child. And that was, again, maybe 5, 6 years old, but that reaction to not seeing anything that looked like, because in my mind, like, even if Oz was a real place, it's like, wouldn't there be like black folks there? Wouldn't there be like, Puerto Rican folks? I mean, that was, I grew up, in a somewhat mixed neighborhood, and there was quite a few Puerto Rican families. So like in that point in time, it was like everybody was Puerto Rican, right? And then by the time I hit like maybe 7th grade or so, you began to realize, oh no, there's Puerto Ricans, and then there's Dominicans, and there's Costa Ricans, and if you confuse them, there's like, you're going to hear about it, right? But everything that I create now, I create in thinking about myself at that younger age, and like how much how much different my life would have been if there had been more inclusion, or if I'd been taught a much wider spectrum of just not just American history, but world history,
Yeah.
And so that fuels me, and it continues to drive me, and it gets a little tiring. And I'll tell you, I had this thought the other day. I don't know about you, but do you have thoughts where you're trying to articulate them in so that it can fit within a single tweet, right? Like I'll do that. And this one I was trying to articulate in a single tweet, and I couldn't get there. But it had to do with critical race theory, and I was thinking about how when it comes to just watching my popular entertainment, I don't want to see stories in Black suffering and Black misery. I don't want to watch movies like 12 Years a Slave or anything like that. And I was like, but if the anti-critical race theory people have their way, then the only way we're going to be able to get this information out is through our popular entertainment, which then leaves it up to, in the case of Black folks, primarily Black entertainers, to stop entertaining and then educating. And that in and of itself is a dangerous precedent. And it's not just Black folks, obviously. It's all the marginalized and oppressed people. And so I'm especially furious right now. I mean, this is my furious face. And I don't know, all I know is what I can do. And that's to keep pushing and keep trying to, there was the only Black folks I saw on TV when I was a kid was like on shows like Good Times. And that was, I couldn't stand that.
Yeah.
And so how do we change that? But the key is that there's people who want it to go back to the way it was even before that. And I'm gonna have to take a nap.
I remember the first time I ever watched West Side Story, my parents explaining to me that even though it's about Puerto Ricans, the only actually Puerto Rican person in the movie is Rita Moreno. And as a child, literally not being able to conceptualize why that was the case. And as an adult, seeing the new film and thinking how interesting it is that we are celebrating that actual Puerto Ricans were cast in a film about people who are Puerto Rican, and how absurd it is that needs to be a celebration in 2022. And yet here we are. What kind of things? So the work that you've done spans across a lot of different titles and a lot of different areas. What kind of things do you hear from your fans, particularly your fans who are not white, who are in more marginalized communities, especially Black readers, about being able to see your work? The context for them, what do they say?
Oh, it's always positive, and it's always reassuring, and it's a lot of stuff is like, I never thought I would see something like this, or and I hear a lot of times from adults, in some cases people that are older than me, which means they're really old, that I heard from someone the other day that was their granddaughter was a huge fan of my work, and it just says to me like, okay, I don't want to put too much importance on myself or what I do, but if there's a young person out there that reads something that I've created or co-created, and that inspires them and makes them know that they have a place within that world, or with anywhere in the world, then I feel like, okay, I've done a good job. And I think back to like when I met my first comic book creator, who wasn't white, the first person of color, and just thinking, oh, wow, like you can do this, right? Like this is possible. And I tend to look at, like, when I'm watching, it doesn't matter if it's TV or movies or reading or comics or anything, I've hit this point in my life where I'm sort of looking at it like, well, what am I not seeing here? Because if there's a certain, character type or certain, ethnicity or gender or anything, if I'm not seeing it, or if the representations that I'm seeing kind of suck, then this is what I need to be thinking about. And so, like, I have a character that's in my head right now that I've created, who I'm terrified of because I don't know enough about her. And and I haven't decided if she's a she or a they, but it's a transgender woman, and it's a Black transgender woman, and I realize that I'm not seeing enough Black transgender women in popular entertainment that make me feel like, okay, this is a good amount, and what representations I do see tend to be very, I don't want to say all of them are negative, but they strike me as being somewhat negative. And so as a creator, I feel like, okay, if the first rule of writing is write what you know, the second rule of writing is learn what you don't know and then write that. And so I've got this Black transgender woman in my head. She doesn't have a name yet, but I know her entire backstory. And the thing is that when I get to a point where I can't figure out what to do, she tells me, well, you need to talk to more people like me. And like, that to me is like an exciting thing, right? Like, I think that the opportunity to get to know as many people as you can who are unlike you in the sort of the obvious ways, whether it's race or gender or any of those things, like, doesn't that make life better?
Yes.
Like so
exciting. I don't get why people are afraid of it.
Yeah, and I don't get it either. I think that but that fear, right? For whatever reason, why those people who have that fear, that's the fear that leads to the banning of books, right?
Yeah.
The fear of change is what and it's even like little things, right? Like even before we started recording, we were talking about pronouns and the way they've changed, the pronouns have changed in our everyday use. It's like, there's a line in the sand. There's a certain generation of people who are like, I don't understand why we have to do this. And I'm in that generation, but I'm also, I know enough young people that I'm like, well, this isn't about us anymore. This is about where language is going. And it's difficult for us because it's change, and change is terrifying, right? So what? Like, let's learn to live with it.
And being, and I always feel like it's those moments of being scared of sort of realizing everything around you is different, that you have these opportunities to grow, but it does take a conscious level of humility to say, yeah, I'm scared, but gonna do this anyway because there's so much here. I have to admit to you that last night I was thinking about the show, and so I started, of course, Googling you, as one does. And I came up with, from 2017, it was a string of tweets that you did, and it was your comics and diversity lessons. And I was actually cheering out loud as I sat on the bed reading this. And I just need to read two of them because it really hit me hard. Lesson 5 was, if diversity is somehow ruining your comic reading, know that the lack of diversity is ruining it for others. And number 6 was, if you don't think representation is crucial in comics, you've never been unrepresented or marginalized. Every single one of the rules were absolutely Bible truth. And they were so amazing. But I thought, what an interesting way for you as a creator to coach people who are readers to think about this differently. Where did some of that come from? Was it your experiences in the industry and realizing how things work?
It's a combination of my experiences in the industry and just meeting people and getting to know them and not being afraid of whatever, right? It's like there's like there are people out there, if they see someone in a wheelchair, they're worried that whatever that person has is contagious. There's people who when I was a kid growing up, and this will date myself, but when I was a kid growing up, there were people who actually thought you could catch being gay, right? They thought that that's, and I never could understand that, right? I was like, you don't, the cooties aren't real, right? But that's how we treat the differences with people. And it's like, I feel like the more terrified you are of somebody, or not maybe terrified, but the more hatred you have, right? Because hatred is what happens, is part of it is the manifestation of fear. It turns to something else. But you should look around and if, like, life is empty, right? I'll never forget, because full disclosure, if anyone is wondering, I identify as a cis heteronormative whatever blah 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 man, right? I dig chicks, that's it. But I remember the first time I went to a pride parade with some coworkers and thinking, and I had so much fun, right? This was 20 something years ago, and there was all these floats and all these amazing people that I met, and I remember thinking, wow, I feel bad for anybody who's afraid to come here just because there's some boys here who like to kiss other boys, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to, right? And so I never wanted to live my life that way. And the older I get, the less I want to live my life that way. The more, some of the best conversations I've had are with homeless people. Some of the most interesting people I've met in my life started out as one gender and had surgery and became another, right? But they're still human beings. And that's my fear of book banning, is that the same thing that leads to book banning is the same thing that leads to not recognizing other people's humanity. They're intricately tied together.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what makes this, frankly, so frightening, because it doesn't stop at the book, because the book is what opens up the world. And when we shut that down and we've criminalized it and called it bad and called it offensive and called it indoctrination, we never get to those places. So I have to ask, are there any books out there or creators out there that are giving you big signs of hope, who are doing really exciting things that you think are starting to change the game? We did start by talking about some of the books that have been banned, like Class Act, for example.
Yeah. Well, I love Class Act and I love Jerry. And there's a younger generation coming up behind me. I just read a book called Wake, and it's a graphic novel. Of course, I can't remember the author, but it's about women-led slave rebellions in the 1700s, and that gave me hope. Whenever I hear from a young person of color or a young LGBTQ person, and they're asking for advice about writing, that's where my real hope lies. And then I was just offered a gig with a publisher, reached out to me, a comic book publisher, and they said, well, who do you want to work with in terms of an artist? And I said, well, it has to be a woman or a person of color. I said, I don't want to, there's plenty of great, talented males, white guys, but like, there's also, I know a ton of people who aren't catching a break. Right. And that's what I want to see. And that's what I'd like to do. And I've been so stuck in my own head doing research that I haven't read enough contemporary stuff. So I guess I'm going to have to go to the bookstore or the library soon and find some interesting stuff. But it's not so much books or even TV as it's just people in general, right? It's that moment of where, as an old man, I'm at the grocery store somewhere and I see somebody and I'm like, they're dressed really outrageous. And I'm like, is that a boy? Is that a girl? Well, who cares?
Who cares?
Like, I go to old man mode first. Your parents know what you're wearing? And then I'm like, that's kind of cool, and that's the thing. It's like, there's the direction we might lean, and then we recognize we're leaning there and we just turn, we adjust course. And I couldn't work in comics and not be able to adjust course a little bit, or even popular entertainment for that matter. So, but I'll tell you, the thing that was most inspiring to me, and I know we got to wrap this up, was there's a show called Reservation Dogs that I just watched recently on, it came out last summer, I believe, but that was like, so inspiring, and everybody from the people who wrote it to the actors. And it was like, yeah, this is something that I'm not seeing that often. This is a slice of life that I don't get to see. And that's, that's great. I'd like to see more of that. I'd like to see us normalizing, especially when we get into issues of gender and sexuality. Like, this is I don't know nothing, right? Like, nothing makes sense to me. So make it make sense to me. Like, I'm here and I'm open. I want to know more about it. Right. And so, yeah, it's hilarious to me because, it wasn't that long ago that I was like, okay, so I know what LGBTQ is, but they've added like 5 more letters to this. What are the, you know? And I was
We're
like,
here to keep you on your toes, David.
yes,
It is our job to keep you on your toes, and we are saving you from old man mode with our alphabet.
and it was like,
Liz is IMing me and telling me that we have got to wrap up. I wish we could keep going for like another hour because I'm having too much fun at this moment. David, thank you so much. This was such a good conversation. Please promise that you will come back because I could do this for several more hours.
I will definitely come back. This has been great.
Thank you so much. And I promise we are going to talk to you again. We need to wrap up in a little bit over time. So let me do this really quickly. I want to remind you, if you were inspired by people like David, you need to be part of PFLAG's Read with Love movement. We're always telling people to take a stand, to get out in there and be fierce. Well, now here's your chance to do it and defend these important pieces of information and entertainment and books and media that are out there. So we want you to know that for every book that gets banned, we want to donate 10. For every book that gets burned, we want to donate 100 of them. So how do you get involved in Reading with Love? I want you to go to pflag.org/readwithlove. You're going to get instructions on how you can donate books, support the program, continue getting informed, teach other people about this, and help other people realize this is all about love and this is about inclusion. You get to be angry, but don't just be angry. Get up there and do something about it. I have started my own Read with Love program, and I actually have David's book, Frederick Douglass. And as soon as I'm done reading this one, I'm going to be donating it to my local library. So we want you to be part of it too. Again, that's pflag.org/readwithlove. We are over time, so I'll remind you the 3 important things for this week. Run fast, laugh hard, be kind, please be kind, and most of all, please get yourself vaccinated and boosted. Follow mask mandates as necessary. We will see you next week with another great show and another fantastic conversation. My name is Jean Marie Nevada. If you need help, please visit pflag.org, and we'll see you next week, everybody. Bye.